right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Well X Breezy. It's a series from Well FM that dives deep. Wow, a little tongue tied into NFT artists that we've collected in our vault. Today we are joined by Eleonora from Breezy Art. We also have Rune here and myself, Decryptolorian, as your host, and we have a very special guest, and his name is Bryan Brinkman. Who has been on the show quite a few times, but we're super excited to have Bryan with us today. He is absolutely awesome, and if you don't know who he is, he's going to tell us.
Always wonderful to be here. One of the oldest communities I've been a part of in this space, so it's always an honor to be back.
Absolutely, and before the show, we were talking about a sentence. I don't even want to go there. Bryan, for those who haven't heard of you, which they probably have, and maybe they don't know that they have, tell us about yourself and what you've been doing in the crypto art space all these years.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think I'm getting close to my 3rd year anniversary of when I found out about NFTs, and I applied to Super Rare, and I got on in February 2020. So it's getting close to my 3-year anniversary. In the space, I make a lot of animated art, colorful art, a lot of art that touches on subject matter about myself, my feelings about the space, what I've learned while I'm in the space. And through that journey, I started Super Rare, went on to Nifty Gateway, did an early art blocks project, did the Genesis Async music project. I love playing around with all these different aspects of like what I think is like ways that you can do things in the space that you could never do outside of it. And that was one of the reasons I originally was drawn to it, because I was like, oh, I can finally sell not just digital art, but animated art. That was a huge reason why it clicked with me very early on when I saw NFTs. And so I'm just such a fan of the technology, and then looking at different ways that I can kind of bridge my art and thoughts in a way that visually connects with people. Did I touch on enough?
You did. You absolutely
Okay, cool.
did. And yeah, I've had the pleasure of being part of that journey a little bit, and it's been a wild ride. I mean,
yeah.
I am sad about a few pieces that I didn't get that I will never forget. But one of these days, when
we can go through that therapy session if you want.
Yeah, we could go through it, and one of them is Eleonora's background, which I'm really glad that she has.
Yeah.
That project is absolutely awesome. I love it. You were one of the first people to do the art blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that background's from my Nifty Gateway drop that inspired the art blocks drop a few months later.
Yeah,
so that's just like the strings in that image. A lot of my work has a thread that connects a lot of them in fun ways.
Yeah, and I love, and I know we've had you on, and you've given us some insight to how that came to be. And we're gonna jump into the gallery in just a second.
Yeah. Well, I remember I think it was either the day of or the day before I did Nimbuds, I came into the Whale Discord and told everybody about it, and that was some real. Thinking about it, that was some real early art blocks alpha for the Whale Discord,
Absolutely. And I mean, thinking about how art blocks has exploded, over the last couple of years. I mean, wow. I mean, you being one of the early adopters of it is just it's just crazy. I mean, yeah, and that was crazy because I remember at the time, and I'm sorry, I'm going to reminisce here. I remember at the time that the squiggly things were live, and they did not mint out.
No, they were still available when I did my Nimbud mint.
Absolutely, and then yours minted out that day. We were interviewing we were in Discord in the Whale Discord talking about them.
Yeah.
And they minted out right then and there.
Yeah, it was very fast. I was on a Zoom with my buddy Manny, and we're like, "Oh, should we buy one?" They're like, "Oh, it's already gone. It sold out in like a few minutes." I'm like, "Oh no."
Yeah. And that's how I knew about the squigglies, because I I went in there and I'm like, well, what else could I buy now? Because this
Did you
is
get some?
no.
Oh,
I was so mad about the clouds. I didn't buy anything. I was like, whatever.
that's, to be fair, that's one of my regrets is I only minted one squiggle. And I could have minted 100 or 200, it's those things you always look back on. You're like, oh, how did I not know? But at the time, like, who knew? I didn't think it would ever reach that kind of level of craziness, that whole DAOs would be built around it. You can't predict that kind of stuff. You just look at something and go, oh, well, Snowfro's a wonderful guy. I'm going to support him and mint this project because it's really neat.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know what is going to take off and what isn't, and that's kind of the fun of the space, right?
Yeah. It's totally random. It was like, well, there's like a project today that's like pumping called Math Castles by Terraforms, which is a very weird generative project that's like very deep and kind of an open source thing. And it just kind of sits around for a long time, and then all of a sudden people get interested and it pumps out of nowhere. But like it's one of those things that like I minted from contract, a year or two ago, and you just kind of sit on it, and eventually people come around and discover why it's cool. And you just have to have that kind of patience.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess
I'm on a tangent. Sorry.
Enough reminiscing. I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's the end of the year. You can do that.
Right,
Yeah.
it's the end of the year.
Yeah, this is tax law season. This is when we have to think about all the good and bad choices we made.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely. And before we jump into the space, something funny for the audience. Brian, can you show your sweater, because I'm a little jealous that my avatar doesn't have one. Okay, there we go. Christmas Claus. I love it.
Yeah. I can only wear this shirt for like 1 week a year, so I got to get it in while I can.
That's awesome. All right. Okay. Now we're gonna jump to the gallery. Okay, so we did this beautiful gallery. We do these every event, and this one is extra special, of course, because it's yours, Brian. Let's start talking about it. Eleanor, sure. you got to meet Brian in person, right?
Yes, I just met him in Miami. Yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, I just met Brian in Miami, and he was giving out pins with his face, and I think that he was giving out one pin for each person that he was meeting. And you said that you met more than 300 people because
I ran out before the week was over.
Yes, but the secret is that I have two. I didn't steal any, but I was at this party and I had my pin in my purse, but then I was walking and Coldy said, hey, someone dropped a pin. I was like, I think that I have it. And Coldy said, you better take it because I think that it's yours. And so I took it, and now I have two, which I will, I'm really like, I'm a big fan of this souvenir, especially when the artist in person is giving them out. So that's my story with the pins. But yes, I met Brian, and no, Brian, I'm very happy that you're here today. It's what a joy, your art.
Me too.
I mean, just like going through it, and again, obviously, because we all know about your art and your work, but to prepare the gallery and the curatorial text that I wrote, I went through the works again, and to explore in a little bit of a deeper way. And also, I was saying before we started the live, all these articles that you like, there's so much text about your artwork, because I was like a little disappointed by very short description on Super Rare, for instance. I was like, no, I love descriptions, of course, but then I find the link to this sent articles. It's fantastic, like the making of, even like the building of the animation, the I don't know, like the reasons why you make it, the topic, everything. Very, very. I wish each artist would do what you did there. Are you?
I think it was very important early on to like not only talk about why I made what I made, but also how I made it, because then it becomes a proof of it's a receipt essentially that says, hey, this is how I made it. I didn't steal it. Especially early on in the space, there was a lot of accusations of plagiarism and lifting and all this stuff, and so having that kind of thing to back you up comes in handy over time. I'm looking at the screen right now. I see the yarn ball with the cat paw. You mentioned Coldy earlier. That was a piece that I would say helped me become good friends with Coldy, because he put together a charity auction for a cat charity in LA, and I made this piece that was auctioned off to raise money for that charity, which was back in 2020 when ETH wasn't worth much. And so the cool thing about that story was it raised a bunch of ETH. They kept that ETH in a wallet, and then
Yes.
a year later, ETH quadrupled, and they had a huge amount of money from that auction. So that's kind of the amazing power of some of these things.
Yeah, see, Cody was telling the story when we were in Miami. I think that now he has a dedicated, he has a room dedicated to Cody in the place for the cats, which is
Really? That's amazing.
yeah. So but it was very, yes, and also like I read the art, even from like an historical, and of course because it's on sand, so it's even like on chain. But then even from like a historical perspective, your first article I read yesterday. Hi, I'm Brian Brinkman. I'm here. I'm new to the space, and I want to reach out to people. Like I think that you wrote I am on sand because I saw whale shark and Jimmy eat writing here, so it must be a good thing. And all this even to have that piece of like documentation is just so valuable. It's just
Yeah.
very nice.
I was very fortunate to have Jimmy and Whale Shark be early collectors of mine, because then I followed them and they were both very knowledgeable and were throwing out so much wisdom about the space early on. It was like I learned about on-chain art from reading Jimmy's rants, and that inspired me to do art blocks. So it's like, who you follow and who you listen to have a huge impact on your path in the space. And so I was very fortunate. The same with Coldy, same with Josie, same with Matt Kane, a lot of money, all these early Sarah Zucker, like all these early artists. You follow them, you see what they're collecting, how they're using the space. Like it's very important how you curate who you listen to in this space. That's why I think when the whale community came around and it was this dedicated community to art, it was a really wonderful place for people to kind of congregate. And we're just looking through some of this work. It's fun. The scroll was one of my more recent. That was about a year ago now, but it's becoming more and more on point with how we're just constantly on social media. So I think that some of the fun of my work is that I like to hide kind of darker meanings in happier imagery.
Yes.
Like I touched on it with my drop earlier this year called Tragic Pop. But it's like, it's kind of the good with the bad. This one doesn't really, that cat doesn't have any negative connotations. That's just a cat made out of cats. That was also for Coldy's. That was for the second year I did Coldy's cat charity. But that was just a fun
Yeah, I just
puzzle,
want
to put together, I suppose, because each face in that is a generative, unique cat head each time it loads. So it's like playing on this idea of PFPs and how they make up a bigger community or form.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with what you just said about the meaning in your artworks, represented in a maybe like dark meanings, represented in a fun way. When I wrote my curatorial text yesterday, I want to read for you it's a quote by Italo Calvino, which is a Italian writer. And it says, take life lightly, for lightness is not superficiality, but gliding over things from above without letting things weigh on your heart. Which and then I wrote, your art is not superficial, it's light. But to be light, it means that you're not putting all this weight on our hearts. Like I'm looking at your art and I'm constantly smiling, curious, excited, but really like I think that it leaves a serene feeling all the time, even though you understand that what it talks about maybe is not that light, or it's not like that serene. So I think that it's a very powerful, I think, from two different perspectives. The first one, getting out of the of the circle of that an artist necessarily needs to be very serious and sad and dramatic and creating a like surrounded by a dramatic kind of environment, or like to transmit the kind of dramatic feelings. and the result, and I think that you are completely like, it's very important, you know, and like in modern times we are still a little bit I think chained to that kind of concept.
Yeah.
And I think that that you do it in such a nice way that you are not mistaken by someone who's just doing, you know, like very you know, like light meaningless animations. But although then the second perspective is that the actual art that we are looking at is just, is, it really is like, it really gives you a feeling of, you know, like you just feel good when you look at it. But it's
Yeah.
unmistakably, which is very important, but unmistakably it talks about serious things. I mean, when I
Yeah.
say it, right, so it's very I think that it's very precious.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like this piece, Defense, was just all about imposter syndrome and how we make art and then we're afraid to show it, and then we have to kind of break down these notions to like let people see it, and then you kind of build it back up for the next piece. Um, but it's, yeah, it's about creating these kind of pleasing loops that if you know, if you're just passing by it, you'll go, oh, that's fun. But if you want to look into it deeper, you might, you know, I always kind of call it like a candy coating to kind of my feelings. Um, but you know, that also sprouted from when I joined the space. I used this kind of, you know, pastelly kind of happier color scheme throughout my work as a way to kind of allow me to jump from one style to another. You see a 3D there, you see 2D next to it. But because those colors are there, even though they're drastically different, black and white, 3D, 2D, they're connected because they have that same kind of candy feeling. And so that was my way of kind of allowing myself to be able to pull myself in different directions, thematically and medium wise, without necessarily severing off all my work. So it kind of ties back to that, you know, thread, keep that thread between my work. So adding symbology, like that diamond you see in that diamond there is also in the diamond in the safe. The cloud in the safe is also the cloud in the explode, you know. So it's like, how do you tie all these together so that you're not repeating yourself, but when someone sees one piece they go, oh, that's a Bryan piece.
Yeah.
So that's always been kind of the push and pull that I kind of guide myself through.
And also I read that that of course, like when you enter crypto art, many things changed, meaning that probably like the main one was that you always had to, you're digital native, but you always had to find a way to like commercialize and sell your works in a physical way, which many times is the other way around, not now, but especially at the beginning in the space, which is also very interesting because it came to you almost as a like as a real need instead of like a natural kind of playing with the medium. And
Yeah.
also wanted to ask you, like, although I think that somehow like the limitations that you found, for instance, like the size of the possibility of like minting certain very little size files also kind
Hmm.
of gave you like some inspirations to create in a different way.
Yeah, totally. So like, people that might be newer to the space might not know that, you know, the first half of 2020, you couldn't upload MP4 video files, for instance. Everything had to be JPEG or dot GIF or GIF, however you say it. Um, and there was a 50 megabyte file limit. And so you had to kind of, it became a game of compression of how do you make the nicest looking quality animation that loops. That's why everything had this kind of loop, because then you get like 2 to 3 times the enjoyment out of it before people catch on that it's repeating itself. And so getting that perfect loop, getting the compression down, getting the file size, it became like, how do I get an HD size GIF under 50 megabytes? And like, you look at people like Pac, he was so smart because he did his in black and white, which reduces the file size so dramatically, that he was able to make really crisp, high quality 3D renders as GIFs. And so it's like mine, which have tons of motion and color, were a huge, huge challenge to like try and figure out how to get them to fit. So that's why they usually have about a 2 to 3 second, you know, time frame, because that was what you had to work in. And so like this piece, you know, it's a high quality 3D render that's HD size, but it's relatively short. You know, you had to cut out a lot of frames. You have to really maximize the usage. But that piece, you can see it's about that was when I started to understand about how gas worked and how, you know, it's, you know, in order to create art, every gas powers everything in the space, and all the building blocks are running on it. And so that was, well, October, or was it August of 2020, right before gas. That was I remember at the time, I was like, oh man, this cost me $40 to upload to Super Rare. That's so expensive. And then like a year later, it was like $400 because Ethereum and gas were both so much higher. So it was like, you know, that was when I started to wrap my mind around, oh, this is going to be a part of the space, and we have to start thinking about how to kind of mitigate it. And that was when we started seeing stuff like Polygon and all these other things start to sprout up. But yeah, I mean, I look at a lot of my work as kind of a journal of my journey, and how I, you know, what I learned about different things, like the safe one in the distance. That was when I started to see people put stuff in vaults. You know, it's like, you know, the whale vault, for instance. It's like you take your art, you put it away, you lock it up, and then you show it occasionally. You give people a little tease of it. So it's fun to kind of like think about like where I was when I learned that, which was what, February 2020. So that was like, I think my third or fourth piece I made. So it's like, you know, around that same time I made a piece about like flipping art. That was when I kind of wrapped my head around that, because I didn't really, you know, I came into NFTs very organically, and I just learned it as I went. Like this piece right here with the space scene, that was you know, probably my most depressing piece. Super Rare. But that was, you know, if you look at the time frame, that was right when lockdown happened with COVID. And I was like, oh, I'm just stuck inside, and this idea of like we're all trapped in our bubbles, and if we go outside, we're in a dangerous place. I did this as like a joint drop with one where there was a fire in the middle, and people were like looking at the fire, and it was all about like, you can't be around people right now, and I was feeling very isolated. So at least a few of my pieces during that time were very like, you know, journals of me feeling very isolated in the world.
Yeah, and it's a journal. It is very so for me it is very interesting, because too many times the creations that we find on chain are, let's say, a little disconnected from the space, a little forced as a, you know, like as a creative act. But even to think about the fact that, you know, like the size limitation is actually a huge component in the final result of an artwork. As you said, like maybe it could be black and white, but for you, the fact that we see loops today, it's because of the size limitations. The interesting point for me is to see that really like this art is embedded, it's connected to the space so much, because now that's what we have. You didn't change the artworks anymore now that you can like upload larger files. It's very, very important. It's like you know, and it makes it more real even for people to understand. It's like architecture. It's like you have a certain kind of space available, and you have to, you know, make it for people to live or to go to work or to have like public meetings. And what do you do with the space that you have? So this creates like a huge connection with what the crypto art space will be like. The fact that an artist has to like is influenced in their own creations because of limitations and status of the space. And then the other part, which is the topics that you just talked about, which is it's like, again, it's another statement that will be a statement over time, where we see the gas. I think that obviously it's art, so it's universal, and so it's very like applicable to many other things. I wouldn't only think about the gas fees of the blockchain when I see it, but I think about many other things. But then like even, you know, this like witnessing of the space, again, it's very important, because sometimes it is a little bit too I'm not a fan of necessarily self-referential art pieces, but I'm also not a fan of using the blockchain in a completely distant, detached way, not considered to be a medium, but only like for transaction. And only a few artists do this. And I think it will be also like very valuable in the future to really like have this piece of documentation on what the space was. So
Yeah,
I think
no, I appreciate that. That piece you're just looking at, Explode. That was created with the limitation of creating it for an infinite objects display. That's why it has this kind of like faux depth. But the fun part is that like in the background, there's a key, there's a pencil, and a chess piece, and those are all like, the ideas of art and utility are hidden in a lot of the artworks we buy right now. And so it's like kind of playing on that same idea of like, we there's this exciting, colorful thing in the front, but in the background, a lot of artists are building in these like tools into their work, which is really fun too.
And can I ask you what was the difference when because obviously you were already coming from animation, art world, illustration, and you mentioned all these people that you met in the space at the beginning, but I think that probably you had a community even before coming to the crypto art space. Do you have like, is there huge differences between the community that you found outside of the crypto art space? I think that you're also keeping both of them. Like, how do you play with that?
Yeah, I mean, before I got into the crypto art space, I was making art. They were for, whether they're 3D cell pieces or screen prints. I was selling them at galleries in LA and New York that were kind of more pop culture galleries, like Gallery 1988 or Bottleneck. And those were fun drops. And the work would sell, I would say, a third of the time the collector would reach out and tell me they bought it. Otherwise, it would just kind of go to a mysterious place, and I had no idea where it went.
Oh,
And so it was really hard to create a community around that because it was all done through a gallery out in LA that I didn't meet the collectors. And so while I was growing a community, I also had a community from just working on lots of television shows. People followed me and been using Twitter for 10 years. So I had, at that point, I think I had, 10,000, 15,000 followers or something. And so they were, I was making shirts. I was doing, like you said, I was doing digital art, but figuring out ways to sell it in various ways. A lot of that was screen prints and T-shirts and stuff like that. But over time, through Tumblr and all these other things, I did grow a small community of people that appreciated my art and collected it. But it wasn't until NFTs that I was able to kind of keep tabs of them in an effective way, build a Discord where they could all hang out. And so that, NFTs gave me a lot more infrastructure for making sure that those collectors were seen and appreciated. And so that was something that I really appreciated, because it's like, whale shark or any of these things, it's like I could reach out to them and talk to them. I knew exactly when they bought it. I could thank them and that kind of stuff. Before, it was just super hard to do that, which is, unfortunate, but that's just kind of, that's, there's an anonymity in the real world, just like the NFT world in that sense.
That is true. And what about the tools and limitations? I mean, the technology itself that we were like talking about.
Well, I mean, just in terms of the old way I used to do it with galleries, I would make physical art, print it, ship it, send it to the gallery. That would cost me like $100. Then the gallery would take 50% of the sale, and I would make a very small percentage. So in the end, I was making my money back essentially. So it wasn't a career. When I started doing NFTs, I was like, oh, well, it cost me a little bit of gas, and then there's secondary royalties. There's all these things. I can price my stuff more effectively in these ways. It just totally changed how I looked at selling art, and it became, a year into it, it was very apparent. I was like, oh, this can actually be a career. It's not just a side a side hustle or a side job. And so, it was always, it went from a hobby to a career, I should say. I was, my career at the time was working in television. I was working 6 days a week on, television shows that aired nightly. And so that kind of shift, it took a while, but, after a year, I'd made enough to like cover my salary for a year or something. I was like, okay, well, I'm diving in now.
Very good.
But
I read about the Brian Brinkman experiment with Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. That was just like a random experiment. You were just like picked randomly.
Yeah, that was just a random experiment. And then years later, I ended up working on the show, but it wasn't connected in that sense. It's because a friend of mine that worked there left and basically was like, "Hey, you want my job?" I said, "Sure." But yeah, that got me involved in Twitter early on. It was a roller coaster ride of a lot of attention, and then people deciding, oh, I don't care, and leaving. So it was like I lost followers every day for like 6 years. Um, and so that was a fun moment with years of me questioning whether I was making interesting content or not. But eventually, it weeded out all the people that didn't care, and the people that actually enjoyed what I did stuck around. And some of them are still following me today. And occasionally, I run into them in NFT things, which is really cool.
Of course, it was like bear market. I mean, like cleaning house. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
because the people that follow you for the experiment, maybe they were not necessarily interested in what. I mean, of course, that you cleaned. It's still very
yeah,
good.
yeah. Yeah, no, it
Yeah,
was it was it
you-
was it was funky. It was a little scary at the time because I was like 1 year out of college, and uh, I was not prepared for people to like find my number and dox me and stuff like that. When you put yourself on a spotlight, now I'm used to it, and I kind of understand what comes with being a public figure to a degree. Um, but at the time, it messes with your mental health to a degree to be like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, everything I say has a reaction or repercussion, which I think in the end forced me to not say anything offensive or stupid on Twitter, which is good in the long run.
That's interesting though, because I mean, I never had that kind of following. So yeah, it's like you
I,
become.
I for as good as that following was, my following from NFTs has far surpassed it. And it's quality following now versus
Yeah,
fake following, so it's much better.
yeah. Can I ask you today? So the okay, so you were creating with what was possible, and then you also you did your generative art project, which is also like another possibility that was brought to you, of course, and the world by technology. And maybe you can talk a little bit about why you wanted to do the generative art project, but also want to ask you, like, is there some technological tool as we are for what we have right now, like in how evolved it is, that interests you today to keep creating like in a different way? I don't know, like I think about the
Yeah,
smart
uh,
contracts.
I'll give you some alpha. In terms of my art blocks project, Nimbuds, which we
Mhm,
talked about at the beginning,
mhm.
the background behind you, my cloudy collection, which was a continuation of my wired piece from Super Rare. Um, when I At the time, I was working at Saturday Night Live with my buddy Manny, um, and he was really getting into coding because we were doing a lot of like scripts to make exporting and workflow things faster at SNL, because you have to make everything in a day and it airs that night. It was very stressful. Um, I had been telling him about NFTs, and I discovered art blocks in November, I think. And I was like, look at this project. This is really cool. It's code, but it's treated like art, and you can create a bunch of different things. And I kind of showed him some pieces. And I was like, look, it's interactive too. It's on chain. This is really neat. And he's like, okay. Because at that time he was like, I'm not interested in NFTs. I don't want to do animation. But when I showed him this, he's like, okay, this is interesting. And so then we kind of put our heads together for a few weeks, and we just kind of learned it as we went. You probably saw that Scent article. If you guys go to my Scent article, you can see it, where we just learned how to make a string. Then we learned how to make a bunch of circles that made a cloud. And as we went, then we put a face on it, because we're like, how do we make this more unique and more generative and more, give it personality? Um, and so it was really just us learning to code as we went. And then once we got to a certain point, I reached out to Snowfro and I was like, hey man, Art Blocks is really cool. I've been playing around with this idea. What do you think? And he's like, I love this. And he's like, my family loves it. We got to do this. And so he's like, how about we put it out in a few weeks? And I said, okay, cool. And then what ended up happening was we were going to do 200 editions. The community was like, that's way too small. You got to do more. And so they said, okay, 400 editions. But because of that, I was like, okay, we have to add more variation to it so that it doesn't get too repetitive. And that was when we added the blushes and the mustache and the box and the blue background. So we made it more interesting. And so like that kind of, that was all done a week before it launched. It was very last minute and very like, by the seat of our pants. Um, but that kind of you kind of create based on, like you said, the mediums and the boxes you're given. And so that all kind of sprung from that moment. And so like if you click on it, you'll see it puts it into its box because originally I saw these as being generative blind box toys, kind of like Kid Robot. And so there's also, if you stare at it long enough, it blinks. So technically it has interactivity and animation, which I felt very happy about. But it was like, I just saw it as like, oh, this is a fun, I didn't fully wrap my mind around the PFP craze that was to come a few months later with hash masks and Bored Apes and all that stuff. But I saw collectibles as being the next wave. And I was like, well, if we can make collectible toys that are unique, that's interesting and new. And it's all on chain and all this stuff. And so, shout out to Jimmy.eth who did Avastars a year before on chain. And that was super inspiring. So, and like, so there was precedent before for on-chain character stuff, but none of them had been done like JavaScript in this way. And so, yeah, it was really just a product of experimentation and doing that kind of stuff. And then talking about like what I'm working on next. I'm currently collaborating with a team to make an on-chain video game. So we'll see how that goes. So again, like where do I see things going? What do I think is interesting? I usually just go based on like, is this something that feels like it's new and interesting? And sometimes that pays off and sometimes it doesn't. And that's okay. Like sometimes you go, oh, well, this is the first Polygon at PFP that's a collaboration with a lot of money and all these people. And you go, oh, it's called Artvatars. And then everyone goes, whatever, who cares? And you go, okay, well, we tried it. It was a little ahead of its time. And, maybe down the line, people will look back at it fondly because it has all these artists and it was a first on a thing. But you never know what's going to connect. It's, you try art blocks and you go, this is cool. I like it. And it's fun. You don't expect ringers to come out. You don't expect Fidenza to come out and like catapult it to this level of the, top tier thing. You just kind of go with what your gut feels and see what happens. And hopefully you make something that is unique and fun.
And why does it interest you to have like a game on chain?
Well, I don't want to give away too much since it'll be the launch.
You can. You got my ears perked up.
But it'll just be it's pushing it in a direction. There has been art blocks that have games and stuff. It's not the first or anything, but it's a platform that I look at and I go, this is interesting and it could grow to be something cool. And I might as well give it a try and see what happens.
Okay. That's over here.
I think that'll be like in a month or two. But I have some other drops before that. That'll be fun, including maybe another art blocks drop in the next month. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah. You remember the frown that we were just looking at with the Nimbud? Mm-hmm. That would be me if I had got that. But I think. So I have definitely, my ears are perked up. I'm going to be watching things. I cannot miss this next one, and I cannot miss the game. That really interests me.
Get in line very early there, DC.
Yeah, as long as I get one before Rune, I'll be very happy.
You.
No, it'll be fun. I try my best not to. I don't know. I'm not a fan of like hype and pumping and all this stuff. So I try to keep everything pretty low key, keep everything pretty small. And I'm a big believer that like I would rather do 10, 100 or 100 edition drops than 10,000 edition drops. Because it's like there's so much more you can do and you're not stuck, spending all your time trying to keep the floor of a 10K up. You can just go and make a bunch of cool things, and overall it becomes a bigger picture and a bigger collection. So the more little things I can do, the more fun I have.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you 100% on that. I'm definitely not a fan of hype But I am a collector, and I need more.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my goals for this year is to work on improving my community, building better roles, a better Discord, building a better website for discoverability of my work. I think that's one of the hardest things in the space for artists is when people say, "Oh, where can I buy your art?" You fumbling around trying to do all this stuff. Like I have a spreadsheet on my website of every piece I've ever put out, but it's like a spreadsheet. It's not very exciting. Building that into something that's discoverable and nice. Stuff like this museum's a great example of like ways that you can like expose people to your work in a way that it gives them a bigger breadth of work than just looking at a piece of paper. So I appreciate it. This is really cool.
Absolutely. Feel free to use this whenever you like.
Ah, sweet. I will. I like the graffiti aspect to it too. I wasn't in there last time I looked. It gives it a nice like New York vibe.
Yeah.
Can I talk about that?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you.
Bryan, first off, what's up? And
What's up?
second off, you were the hardest, easiest person to design a gallery for. only because there I wanted to find in my head I had a representation of your work, who you are as a person, like where you are IRL, and was just thinking to myself, I know with the color schemes especially, and some of the recognizable iconography that's being shown right now, that this would match. But the background for this took me so long to find because I was just critiquing myself over and over. This was like one of like 17 different backgrounds I chose. And then when I finally found this one, it didn't fit. It was pretty gnarly looking. And so I got it fit the best way that I could. And then you and I spoke about like the background music, and you were right when it came to like your thoughts on if it would be too distracting or whatever. So I kind of went with this vibe because I thought with the pieces that were chosen to be in here, it matched it perfectly, especially with the dancers.
Yeah.
And then that sculpture right there, thanks for correcting me on that. It's also the placement of it when it was in multiple different places. I ended up with this being the final spot because of the big white open door, which is what that is on the left there. It kind of gave something to it, especially if you moved around it and looked at it instead of that just big white space.
Yeah.
That I couldn't get rid of without
Oh,
it.
yeah. No, I like it. The light cast on it. It's cool.
Yeah, and then of course I wanted to match the colors of the gallery and the water to your style. I will say for those that don't know, Bryan was the first artist that I ever helped work with in Whale for the piece that's all the way in the back there for Arctic's Whale that we have. And so it's kind of nostalgic for me coming around full circle, having that piece in here and actually and doing the Arium gallery
Yeah,
for you.
that's such a cool piece. There's a few pieces
Yeah.
I've made that just totally destroy like Twitter compression and like
Yes.
social media, and that's one of those that I get a really big kick out of when I can just like drive them bonkers. Like I did a piece for Amani's charity project a month or two ago, and it looked insane on Twitter, and that I just find it really funny.
Yeah, and what's cool though about it is all of these pieces. Obviously, we chose ones in the vault, and also some other pieces that stood out to us or best represented you as an artist. And I will say that it was personally, it's been a very stressful last 2 months for me, an extremely stressful time. DC, if you could turn around and look at the noodles, as what I call them.
Yeah.
To get this right here, I was looking up at it as you guys all do. This piece right here was the most calming piece that I've ever worked on in this gallery. setting up, because I obviously like changed the size of it and try to get it like pronounced to
Yeah, it's
showcase
really
the whole
cool.
thing. But watching them fall down into place while I'm working on it just like totally calmed me down. It was like a stress ball
Oh,
almost.
that makes me
So
feel so good to hear. Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
piece and what you did with it is exactly what I wanted from it, because
good.
I made it with the super rare gallery in mind at NFT NYC this summer. And I made it one, it has my cables, which are referring to connections, and it's all about how we connect with these people and we get tangled up and then we all kind of go our separate ways, and it kind of repeats itself over and over, especially when it comes to these like NFT events. Um, but the I made it with the idea of like people standing in front of it and taking selfies, and it being kind of this pronounced piece that would be a part of a room. And so the fact that you made it so big, and like right now we're looking at someone standing in front of it, it's exactly what I had hoped. So it's
Yeah.
perfect.
And it's what's really cool about it is the fact that normally I have those bigger pronounced pieces on the opposite side, and I did want to change it up a little bit, but I love the breakdancing also pieces that you did. So I have a few of them, and but I didn't want to take away from the big noodles over there. But yeah, those dude, you're good, and this is good, and just
Oh,
like you
thanks,
said.
man.
And just like you said, whenever a piece comes up that that you make, I know it's you, because you've in my head set the type of, I guess, set the tone for the type of art that you create, and that I've watched you create in the past, even on mainstream media with SNL and all.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's awesome, man.
No, I really appreciate that. And yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's one of those things that while I'm making it, I think about it consciously, but then I look back on things and I see connections that I don't necessarily think of at the time as well. I mean, you look at this falling guy here. That guy is directly connected to the inspiration between for the dancing one we were just
Yep,
looking at.
yep.
But very different executions. But that was, at the time I made this, it was a continuation of a piece that Sarah Zucker owns. That was the reverse. It was on tan, and it was a guy dancing. Took it
Yeah,
this route, and then that becomes the next thing. And like it's fun to like go back and even looking at Nimbuds, and then going back to my very first super rare piece, which is Explode, and it has a bunch of clouds. It's like
yep.
I didn't think of myself as being a cloud artist at the time, but over time it just became that.
Nice.
At the time it was just a bunch of TNT explosions essentially.
Yeah.
But it's like it's fun to see how like all these pieces come together. Like
Yeah. There's two other things that I wanted to bring up, and one was with the breakdancing pieces. The simple fact of that you could see like when it's about to load, because Twitter hates that piece, especially that one of those.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but when you
That
see it
one's
about
on
to
Nifty
load,
Gateway. It's not
yeah,
gonna be on here. But
you can see
um
you can see the whole, you can see all of like the tubes that have yet to be filled, and that just blows my mind how
yes.
all of those pieces when lit up make exactly what you're going for. And then of course the one with the that reminds me of a fireplace with clouds, which was
Yeah.
in is in there too. It's just they're calming. They're calming.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean that idea, the flicker fusion,
Yeah.
um, that idea of showing the paths ahead of time, it was directly inspired by in animation we use the term onion skinning,
Okay.
which is you can turn on all the frames before and after what you're drawing as a way to like see where it's going. And so that idea of like showing the entire onion layers ahead of time, and then you see how they piece together to show the thing.
That's amazing.
That was kind of the inspiration behind it, and I really appreciate you calling that out, because I was like, the whole thing was me trying to show people how animation works by basically
Yeah.
saying, here's all the frames, and now we're going to play them out.
It worked. It worked because I looked at that and I was like, wow, all of these make this. And just it shows the amount of work that goes into it also to make something like that.
Yeah. No, thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's fun. It's fun seeing all these things. You could see at the beginning, I didn't fully understand what my style was going to be. That first, like that Vortex one really kind of sticks out as a sore thumb where it doesn't have my colors. That was me kind of, throwing a lot of things against the wall and seeing what worked and what didn't work. Even the globe doesn't have my colors. It wasn't until I did like those first 5 and reflected on it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick with these colors now. But there's bits and pieces, but I think that globe one, that was a fun one, and I think that was me wrapping my head around crypto, and I was like, oh, the computer age controls the world. Like, this is the future. But looking back on it, I'm like, it's fun. I mean, the whale vault has such an interesting, diverse array of pieces from my early works, which is really fun. Because there's the isolation. And if you go up, you can see the immolation, which is the next one, because those are released together. That's the one where it's like we can all hang out, but we got to have our safe distances between each other. You can't get too close to each other or you get burnt. So it was funny being in that weird space. Same with Wired. Wired was me being, again, isolated from COVID and being like, I'm stuck on my computer all day working on 2 jobs and NFTs, and I'm like overwhelmed and kind of just swinging back and forth, stuck at home, wearing my mask. So it's fun, like, looking back on these things, because it's like, it transports me back to those weird moments.
Folders.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, Brian. Looking at your art does transform me back to that time too.
Yeah.
And it was funny because we were talking back then, and I remember making a promo video for your work.
I remember that.
Man, and yeah, every one of these it transports me back to that time. And then of course we've had a few interviews where you've kind of dug deep behind the stories of the pieces, and honestly, I was feeling a lot of the same things you were. So I definitely connect to a lot of your work.
Yeah. That Spectrum one, that's the beginning of that whole Flickr fusion thing, but at the time it was just playing around with like making a fun version of the wave piece that I had done earlier. So it's like, there's the groove piece that Sarah owns. Yeah. Where it's like that translates directly into what that nifty drop was, but
Man, I love it. And Falling is actually one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, I think over time a lot of people have gravitated towards that one. I think it's really fun.
Yeah,
it has a great feel to it.
Shoot, I remember when you released Saxophone on.
Yeah, that was a Halloween drop.
Yeah, the Halloween drop. Yeah,
and that piece ends up. If you go back and watch that NFT sketch on SNL, this guy's dancing on the blackboard behind Chris Red.
Oh, that's awesome.
I never realized that, and I'm going to have to do that now.
But I was really proud that Alessio collected it, because Alessio is one of the best 3D artists in the world, and getting his seal of approval was like getting a gold star for me.
That's amazing,
man. Okay, well, we're close to time, but before we go, I wanted Eleonora to go over her curatorial text, because that is really cool. I'm going to put it right on the screen here. And yep, as fast as I go. Okay. Let me run over there real quick.
So nice.
Okay.
Artworks. Yeah, no, the curatorial text it starts with the quote that I mentioned.
I love that quote, by the way.
At the beginning, because it's really what I thought when I saw your art. I was like, let's not mistake lightness, which is such a precious feeling, with superficiality, which is completely the opposite that I see in your art. Yes, so I write, the art of Brian Brinkman is not superficial, but it doesn't let things wait on our hearts, which I think this is my statement. But also I'm very happy that that we hosted you and your art at the end of the year, because it was a strange year, not always great, but
yeah, for sure,
very good also, because I believe that it's like it was the year where, after what happened last year in 2021, we really sit down again and regroup, gather, ask ourselves, meaning as a community, as a space. I mean, who are we? Where are we going from here after the earthquake that we had in 2021? which was traumatic. And of course, when you go through times like this, I think that everyone is talking about it, which I refer to the bear market is also a way to really like see, like the real meanings, see what we want to do, build and create a meaningful project. It was a special year, I would say, for creativity. At least that's what I noticed. And it was a year where like we really could have the time, I think, to dedicate to research again, finally, and creation, because right. But also very hard year. So I think that to have exactly your art here with, leaving us with this sense of, as I said, like serenity, really, like I just keep smiling when I look at your art, although knowing that behind that it's like there's a lot. It's a very, I think, perfect way to conclude the 2022.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
And I mean, very happy to see all those who are still here after 2022. I think we made it. It's going to be fantastic. And also, this is the last show that we have for the BREEZY Curates Well. We're gonna stop for a while. We have been doing this for a year and a half, which is incredible. And so I'll miss our galleries month. It was a very, like, for me, very important appointment to just again find the time to sit 1 hour and talk about art, which seems very easy, but sometimes it's just incredible. And Brian, I mean, thank you for being here. I'm just very happy that for everything that I said, that we concluded with this amazing, surrounded by these amazing colors and movement and serene atmosphere. It's the best wish, I think, and summarizes the year for everyone.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it. I totally agree with you. I think, I'll conclude with this, and then I got to run. But you touched on the most important thing. This year has been a real mixed bag. We've all been hit in various ways. Now is the time to look at what we have and reflect on it. Think about what brings us joy. Think of the memories it brings. Now is these curations. Now is the time that we go and we look at what we have and why it means something to us. And I think putting together galleries, putting together decas or on cybers or whatever you want to do, any chance for people to go back and reflect on the art that brings them joy is what it's all about in my mind.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Wow. That was fantastic. Brian, Eleonora, Rune, this has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thank you again for putting together all this curation and galleries. It's beautiful, and it means a lot. Again, a wonderful way to close out the year.
Definitely. Absolutely. We're gonna have to, one of these days, we're gonna have to meet up, all of us, and
we will.
Yeah, NFT NYC.
Actually, maybe I'll drag Rune's butt over there, and we'll go and we'll meet up. I think we're definitely gonna be there this year, so it'll be exciking.
Well, thank you this year, Rune, for having me all this month. And
No problem.
Community. So you know how much I love this appointment. So thank you so much. It's been very great.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
It is. Yes. So yeah. Okay, folks. I know we got to go and go back to jobs and other things. But yeah, it's been wonderful. And again, thanks everyone for tuning in. Please visit the gallery. Please visit Brian and his work on Twitter. And he has, he's everywhere that you'd want him to be.
And DC, real quick. Sorry, guys. I just want to give a reminder, even though that these are stopping, the galleries are still there and will be there as long as Arium exists.
Absolutely. Yes.
And as we have a connection. Yeah. And power.
Correct.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So definitely watch out. And Brian, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but when you do your other things, please let me know, because I'm interested, and maybe we can have you back on to talk about them.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much. And yeah, next year. Everybody relax for the next 2 weeks. Enjoy the end of the year, and then we'll hit next year running. Okay.
Absolutely. All right. I guess my dog is telling me I gotta go.
All right. I'll talk to you all later. Okay. Thanks
Bye.
again.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.